Good afternoon to all, and good morning to all, for especially our panelists who are joining us from the other side of the Atlantic. The EPAWI project and WICA, Wine Innovation Collaboration Alliance, are very happy to have you join us today for an online workshop on innovation in the U.S. wine industry. Today, the goal is to go over the main challenges, the ongoing research, and the supporting structures from experts in the US market, whether it be the practical side, the producing side, and of course, the research and academic side. The goal today is to connect knowledge from both sides of the ocean, having experts from the US speak to us here in Europe so that we continue working together for the advancements and can continue producing quality wine, even though everyone has their own challenges, whether it be climate change, cost management, sales issues, and workforce. To look at these different challenges and, of course, the different ways that innovation can help the wine industry to go about these challenges, but also the opportunities. I would like to thank the European Union, who co-finances this project to help share knowledge and to also support the international development of innovators. Also, the other members of the EPAWI consortium from Spain, Portugal, France, and Italy. And now I would like to share a bit about the EPAWI project before going in to the real interesting part of the workshop, which of course are the presentations from our panelists. So the project EPAWI, the European Partnership for Auxiliary Wine Industry Innovation, has different goals. And the final goal is to create the Wine Innovation Collaboration Alliance, which aims to be a structure of associations, of suppliers, of researchers, of producers, working together to improve and increase the wine industry. So before creating this alliance, there are some certain steps that have to be taken before, and that's what we've been doing during the EPAWI project and what we hope to continue doing. The first is to detect and understand the main challenges presented by wine growers and producers. We have a survey with over 700 answers of wine producers from all over the world, sharing their challenges and opportunities to help connect what's going on in different parts of the world, and also organizing webinars like we are today, where the people who are working every day through these challenges talk to us about them and also how they are currently overcoming them. To face the challenges through auxiliary company involvement, research, and cross-sectoral innovation. So the goal of our association of WICA is to connect different actors from different countries. So usually researchers will have connections to different countries, maybe suppliers, maybe producers, but the goal of EPAWI and WICA is really to bring together the whole value chain and to encourage conversation to foster innovation on an international level. Of course, through international development of all of the stakeholders, and as I said, to establish the Wine Innovation Collaboration Alliance. And so we're very happy today to be able to present innovation in the US wine industry, which combines all of the goals of our project. And now I'm happy to introduce Gianni Trioli, CEO of the Italian company Vinidea, so experts in technical updates to the wine industry, who will be our moderator today and who will continue with the introduction of our panelists. So panelists, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Gianni. Thank you to our attendees, and looking forward for the rest of the hour and 20 minutes that we have together.
Thank you, Gracie. Thank you for the introduction and also for the words on this week that we are trying to put in place. Actually, in a few months, we'll have something more formal to which people can become member. So I'm the moderator of today's workshop, which is an outstanding actually workshop because of the people who accepted to be panelists in this. And we have a very top level panel composed by research people, so scientists, by people who are engaged every day into production in different situations, people who are involved in applied research and in more basic research. And then we also have people who know how something can be um, uh, sorry, but I have a message that as we went into another language means that the system understood that I'm not speaking good English. So sorry about that. And people, I was saying that can give some practical hints on how to approach this big production country, which is US. The workshop will be divided, as you can see here, in 3 blocks. The first block devoted more on research, the second on production, and the third on distribution and supplying innovation. And the attendees can pose question on the question and answer tool that everyone has in his own language. If you prefer to pose the question in language different from English, I can help in the translation if you want, but please make a precise question and short text so we can speed up, and we will be able to answer as many questions as possible with the limit of time we have, but all the questions that will not be answered directly, we will somehow collect them and find a way to have an answer from the panelists later on. Okay, so I think we can start, and we have the honor today of having with us two important persons in the environment of California and US, and very much involved in research and not only research. So, which are Nikki Dukuthlian, who is the Vice President of Viticulture of Ernest and Giulio Gallo, and also is a research chair of the National Grape Research Alliance. And we asked Nick to talk about which are the main challenges of wine grape growing in the US, and also, of course, what the NGRA is doing. In the same block, we have Federico Casassa, professor at the Wine and Viticulture Faculty, the Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. And also, he will give us a sort of overview of what Cal Poly is doing in helping innovation to be developed and to be introduced into the California system. And then we will have some questions. So if Nikki would like to share your screen and maybe give us the first talk of the workshop, that we see your screen, but not in a presentation mode. But I see from your mouth that you are coming.
Yes, okay, ready to go. All right.
And I started thanking you. We'll thank all the others for this. Thank you, Nikki.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the invitation. And it's always an honor to be on this esteemed panel with all my colleagues. So again, thank you, Giovanni, for kindly inviting me. So I only have a few minutes, so I'm going to go through these slides very quickly and be happy to answer questions either during the session or later via email. So what Giovanni asked me to talk about, and there's a combined production and research talk all rolled in one. What are our challenges? How are we going to address those primarily with research and adaptation? And what do we see for the future? So it's very clear everybody's facing the same issues around climate change. In California, I'm going to speak specifically when we say the U.S. industry, California represents roughly 90% of the U.S. industry. So this will be a very California-centric talk, but certainly you can ask about other regions of the country if you wish to do so. We obviously have tremendous concerns around water availability, water and labor scarcity is a major issue we're dealing with. And then just the overall focus of vineyard sustainability, what that looks like in the future. We believe that the research we need to address these topics, are related to analytics and spatial vineyard management. Mechanization and automation are huge for us in terms of reducing labor, vineyard design, and then I think the holy grail for all of us, both in America, Europe, and everywhere, really germplasm improvement. We'll talk about that at the very end, and how we improve production efficiency. And so with regard to climate change, we always talk about the warming climate. And I think at least in California, because we grow wine grapes as you do in many of your countries in such a wide geographic region, I don't think the rising temperature, the gradual increases in temperature, while problematic, are not the most immediate problem we have. I think in California in general, from our perspective, it's really about the number of days that we're seeing that exceed temperatures of 35, 40 degrees centigrade. We see tremendous decreases in fruit quality for clusters that are exposed. I have a graph there with showing you the number of days over 100 degrees Fahrenheit and its effect on fruit anthocyanins. And the fact that the number of days above that threshold temperature, we use 100 as our threshold for heat waves, seems to be increasing in all of the regions of the state. So at least in a more immediate way, how we deal with these short heat waves that can last from 2 to 5 or 6 days is probably our most immediate concern with respect to climate change at the moment. And so we see a lot of short-term heat wave mitigation infrastructure being installed in our vineyards, from vineyard covers to water misters, agrivolitics. You see a few applications there. That's very expensive, not very practical or applied to a wide scale yet. People growing cover crops in the middle of the vine row, irrigation, et cetera. So there's lots of applications with our existing vineyard infrastructure to try and reduce the heat load of our vineyards. And we also see, where we're able to retrofit trellises, a trend towards retrofitting trellises, moving away from the vertically shoot position trellises in coastal areas that we really went to in the early mid 1990s to early 2000s. Those vineyards, as they're being replaced now, many of them are reaching 30 years of age. They're being replaced with modified units. We no longer are seeing a lot of VSP, a lot of modified VSP, and even going back to the traditional California sprawl, where we have pendant shoots and the ability to shade the fruiting zone to a greater extent than we do with our vertically shoot position trellises. And irrigation is also a very important practice in our existing vineyards in terms of how we manage these heat waves. We look at increasing irrigation levels. We look at increasing irrigation either 2x, sometimes as much as 3x of our standard amount, just for the short time during the heat wave, and how that impacts photosynthesis and also fruit quality. And what we generally find that when I say doubling, we're generally producing wine grapes at between 65 and 70% of evapotranspiration, of the expected evapotranspiration rate for a vineyard. And we might double that to 120 or 130% beginning the day of the heat wave or the day before the heat wave and continuing through the heat wave. And if we do that, we're able to maintain pre-stress photosynthesis levels, as well as improve fruit quality dramatically. So that's an active area of research that we're still trying to implement. Of course, we're trying to use the least amount of water possible to get the maximum benefit. And I think that's true just in general in California. We certainly face the threat of increased water scarcity due to drought, and just due to the number of acres and competing acres of crops such as almonds and others, alfalfa, that use large amounts of water. And so I think for vineyards, we have really focused on making every drop of water count using modern technology of sensors and anything that can help us more accurately estimate and apply the correct amount of water to specification. And we've done a lot of work using remote sensing to calculate the amount of water that we need to use, as well as how to apply that water most efficiently. This is I would say it's beyond emerging. It's in practical application now. Many of you have probably seen the application OpenET published by NASA, but we have remote sensing models that we can use to irrigate our vineyards, and many of us are applying those today as such. And, in California, labor supply, in spite of maybe what you might read about immigration into California in particular, we still have a shortage of labor. And then in this chart, the little table, I tried to present the fact that while the number of vineyard acres in California continues to increase, the number of available workers decreases. We've replaced some of these folks with technology, of course, but still our labor gap continues to increase. So labor is becoming more expensive and more difficult to find. And so in many ways, mechanization in California today is being driven not so much by cost savings, but typically by not having sufficient number of labor to do the practice that we need in a timely fashion. And so I think things like automation and mechanization will be very, very important for the future sustainability of our vineyards. Again, not to reduce cost, but simply to provide the labor with machines that we can't provide, we can no longer provide manually. And lastly, germplasm selection and genetic improvement. This is a major effort worldwide. No different in California. We continue to have a very large breeding program for rootstocks. Many of you know Andy Walker was our former rootstock breeder at UC Davis. He's retired now. That position is replaced by Dr. Luis Garcia. And he's continuing the work that Andy started. And again, we're doing more and more work with Dario Cantu at UC Davis and others throughout the U.S. You're really understanding to a greater extent, some of the key genetic mechanisms controlling, things like drought stress and other things that will be very, very helpful to mitigate the long-term effects of climate change. So just to summarize, I think we're all concerned about the same things in the case of climate change. And really, I think extreme heat events and variable precipitation will continue to drive major changes in our production systems, particularly as vineyards are pulled out and replanted. So in our existing vineyards, and what I consider the short term, irrigation, I have a star there, assuming we have the water, irrigation will continue to be a major lever that we can pull in terms of trying to mitigate particularly the effects of increased temperature and shortwave heat waves. Canopy management practices, as I said earlier, other cultural practices can help mitigate those effects. As new vineyards are planted, I think we have begun to think completely differently about how we'll design our vineyards in terms of row orientation, spacing, trellis design, training systems. Production systems will just evolve to address these future challenges, and we already see that. We don't have all the answers today, but there's a lot of research on really just how we develop and maintain the vineyard of the future. Precision mechanization systems, as I said earlier, focused on improved quality rather than cost savings, are really our focus moving forward. And I think, I believe, and I'm not sure this is held by many of our fellows in Europe or certainly by the regulators in Europe, that really germplasm improvement is really the long-term solution to address our changing environment. I know we're doing a lot of work worldwide, including the United States, with traditional breeding and breeding new varieties, but I really believe that the power of genetics will not be unleashed until we start using improved genetics to actually address our existing varieties, to actually improve our existing traditional European, what I consider the old world wine grape varieties. I think we're the only horticultural commodity in the world that's dealing with the same germplasm today that we dealt with 400 or 500 years ago. And so we look at all the other commodities that are grown and how things have advanced tremendously, even within our industry, in the table grape industry and raisin grape industry. New varieties have been introduced, which dramatically improve production efficiency, and the wine grape industry has stood still for hundreds of years. So I think that's a major topic on my mind that we need to address, and we really need more work around the functional genomics. I think the tools to help us improve existing varieties are being developed and being applied successfully today. But we just don't have many gene targets. So I think the real key in the next couple decades will be doing the functional genomics necessary to understand how we can use those tools to the greatest extent. And then I'll leave you with this one. I think in California, at least, we've come to the conclusion that really increasing yield per acre while maintaining or improving quality is the greatest potential for improving production efficiency and reducing the environmental footprint of our industry. It's very clear that moving forward, in order even to maintain our current grape supply, we're going to have to do that on fewer acres using fewer resources. The pressures from the regulatory environment, as well as just the number of people that we have in the state of California, at least, is such that we're going to have to do it on fewer acres in the future. So that, Giovanni, thank you so much. I'll hold there and I'll turn the podium over to Federico.
Yes, and thank you so much, Nick. We gave you too short time because we have so many to tell us, but I'm sure we will be able maybe in the future to come back and to go more deeply into some topics. And yes, Federico, if you can now complete, let's say, this overview. I know that you are more a wine science person than a viticulture person, but we are very interested to know more about Cal Poly activity program and, of course, your reserve topics. You are muted, Federico. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Well, first and foremost, thank you, Gianni, for the invitation. And I guess good morning for us in California and good afternoon for you guys in Europe. Thank you for the invitation again. And it's truly great just to see at least, Nick and Jose. We are relatively close by, but, we don't get to see each other very often. So it's great. And on that as well, it's great that Nick covered kind of the main viticultural challenges. My presentation is going to be slightly different based upon what Gianni mentioned or asked me to do. I'm just going to show you what we are up to here at Cal Poly. And I'm going to go relatively quickly. Most of the information that I will be sharing here is published. Sadly, Gianni, as I mentioned, after this presentation, I have to sign off because I have a class at 9, so I have to really run for my life after. But I understand that this is being recorded. And with that, I'm just going to get going and just to summarize what I will be presenting here. So our research program really covers a very large arc, I would say, more or less 185 miles. We do research with fruit from Monterey County, Paso Robles, Santa Maria, Santa Ynez, the Santa Rita Hills, so on and so forth. For those of you that are in Europe, we are in the central coast of California, and in that small map of California, you can see where is our area of influence, okay? Thanks to the support of the California wine industry mostly, including the Regnick family, Justin, Jerry Lord, as well as the Gallo family, we have built these 2 buildings in which we have really 3 wineries, research labs, sensory labs, chemistry labs. The 2 buildings were in the vicinity of $23 million. And I always said that out of those $23 million, 0 came from the state of California. So they were completely privately funded, industry funded, that means. We have a commercial winery. We are bonded for 5,000 cases. So we make commercial wine. I'm responsible for those wines. We pretty much make 2,000 cases. We don't obviously want to compete with the industry, but in these kind of presentations, I always like to emphasize that our primary goal is teaching. We have the largest undergraduate program in the United States, more or less 300 undergrads, and we offer 3 concentrations, viticulture, enology, and wine business. So as we say, we cover everything from grape to glass. Okay. As well, within the same confine of our commercial winery, we have a research winery. We have 36 of these small fermenters, fully jacket. We fully temperature control. We really can do a bunch of things with these small volume fermenters. They are more or less 110 liters, 30 gallons. So this is exclusively research. So we have a strong research component as well. And again, with the support of industry and grants, we also have built a full chemistry lab. Now we can measure all aspects of wine, including volatile composition, non-volatile composition. And on the top of that, we can combine that with sensory research. This sensory lab was funded by Jerry Lord. For those of you that know Jerry, he's a person that strongly believes, particularly on wine sensor analysis, formal wine sensor analysis, and this lab was sponsored by Jerry. Now we are using the lab full time. I'm actually in the process of hiring a full-time lab technician, and this is how a typical panel will essentially look like. So I'm not going to dwell much here, but this is something that we do mostly once a week, and this is exclusively for research. Okay. Now, if you allow me, I would like to transition to kind of a quick overview of the major research projects that we have completed already. And again, I apologize in advance if I go relatively quickly. The idea is not to show you data, but just to show you what we have done. Okay, and this is most of this data is already published anyway. So we first start doing some work on co-fermentation, co-fermenting Syrah with Viognier, trying to understand why people add Viognier to Syrah. But we also expanded the project by co-fermenting with other varieties, Grenache Blanc, Picpoul, Roussanne. We have also done co-fermentation studies or blending studies with varieties that might have a complementary phenolic composition like Malbec and Merlot. Okay, and this is actually part of work of Emily Stoffel, which was conveniently stole from me by Gallo. I'm joking. She's now working for Gallo, which is really, truly an honor. But what Emily found is that this is very interesting. I'm just giving you the takeaway of 3 studies. What we found together is that esters and fruit components increase the length post-expectoration, so people perceive more length with these fruity components on the wine if you achieve them. And on the other side, something that we kind of expect or know empirically, herbaceous, herbal or vegetal aromas tend to shorten length as well. So that took us 3 papers, but I think it's pretty interesting insights. We have also done some work on the effect of vinage. Zinfandel is an heritage variety here in California. We were interested in understanding if physiologically, agronomically, chemically, sensorially, all vine Zinfandel was different from, so to speak, young vine Zinfandel. And we did a bunch of work with Jean Dodson-Peterson. Now she's at Washington State University. She's the department head there. And we map root architecture and everything, comparing all vine versus young vine, trying to understand agronomical aspects as well. And we cap everything with a very strong sensory panel just to see if there is a really all vine character. People talk about all vine character, an all vine character associated with these all vines. And we proved that, and we actually found that wines from all vines show more complexity and a variety of aromas that were absent in the wines made from the young vines. I'm not going to spend much time in the next one, but as you know as well, or you might know, Zinfandel, Primitivo, all this kind of a group of varieties from Croatia and Puglia. These varieties have large variations, intrinsic variations in berry size. They have a very heterogeneous ripening, and we did some work on trying to understand the effect of berry size on the chemical and sensory composition. We were able to segregate berries by size. We did a bunch of physical analysis, chemical analysis, and we even were able to collect enough berries to make wine and to do sensory analysis. We are about to publish this as well, so this will be coming soon. Because we are in the central coast of California, Pinot Noir is extremely important for us, and we have been looking at tools to enhance texture on Pinot Noir. I am especially convinced that the large majority of consumers, the layman consumer, pays much more attention to mouthfeel than aroma. So I'm particularly keen on building mouthfeel, aroma, texture, and retronasal flavor. We have done a lot of work on Pinot Noir specifically because we are obliged, simply because of the prominence of Pinot Noir in the area. Work with extended maceration. We have done some work with adding stems, especially stems treated with microwave, which is kind of a predicament. We have found kind of a method or a technique to dry stems outside, and essentially a way as well, I'm going to show you in this video, to add them on the fermenter. I always mention that when people add dry stems, they need to be pushed all the way to the bottom of the fermenters. There are reasons for that. This is an 8-ton fermenter, so it can be done at relatively large scale, okay? And the beauty about this is that is published as well. So we have, this is already published, and you guys should have complete access to this. I want to keep going. I have a few more slides, more work on Pinot Noir, fermentation temperatures and fermentation regimes. This work was inspired by a close friend of mine, the head winemaker of a large winery here in the area. And in order, what he does for his high-end Pinot Noir program to build complexity is to ferment at different temperature ranges, and that afford him like a completely different, I would say, a spectrum of phenolic composition and aroma composition that he blend. So I was interested in seeing the effect of fermentation temperature on Pinot Noir. And again, we have published this already. This is again work of Emily Stoffel, now at Gallo again, looking at how these wines evolve during the consumption of the wines, post-expectoration. Obviously, we cannot have our consumers drinking the wine. They have to expectorate, but that's akin to essentially drinking the wine, to an actual drinking consumption. This technique is called time intensity sensor analysis, and this is part of Emily master thesis, okay? As well, part of her work and part of my work and part of my 2 grad students' work is trying to understand the drivers of mouthfeel. And people tend to focus mostly on tannin and alcohol and sugars, and those are important drivers of mouthfeel, and we understand those. But part of work of Emily as well, what we have found is that the intrinsic physiology, your physiology, is an important driver of the perception of mouthfeel. We found that salivary flow rate, the amount of saliva that we produce, is extremely important in the way we perceive astringency. And we human beings show such a large variation in the production of saliva that we really perceive astringency in very different ways. I always say that we really live in different astringency worlds. What is high astringency for me might be low astringency for someone else, and vice versa. I'm finishing up here. We are also interested in exploring the dynamics and the physical aspect of phenolic extraction, how actually phenolic extraction happen from the edges of broken skins or from the surface of the seed. We have a couple of models, I would say proposed models for phenolic extraction and retention in red wines. Again, this has not been published, but at some point it will be published, hopefully. And the last piece of research that we are doing, I have 3 grad students working on this project. We have found that with the right probe, we are getting very interesting results, particularly during the monitoring of the redox potential, the oxidation reduction potential. We start working with Petit Syrah and Pinot Noir, and then for those of you that know Petit Syrah and for those of you that know Pinot Noir, they might wonder why. Well, because I wanted to choose varieties with a very, very different phenolic composition. I wanted to choose something white and something black, and see how they react to these stresses that we were applying. And by stresses, I mean these very contrasting maceration techniques. We are in the process of publishing this as well. Punch downs, pump over, no-cap management, no-cap management with sparging with air, and no-cap management with the sparging with nitrogen. And we are about to publish this relatively soon. I would say within the next 6 to 7 months. And the evolution of the redox potential is very telling. These probes, I'm going to disclose the name of the company, Hamilton, really afford like a very, very detailed, I would say, monitoring of the redox potential. This is extremely sensitive and the numbers are very, very robust. We have done some experiments also as well at industrial scale. We have a partnership with a couple of local wineries, and we are looking at the effect of cap management on Pinot Noir, specifically reduced cap management. This might sound like an oxymoron for those of you, but there is such a thing like doing less and extracting more. And we even have a model, a proposed model to explain how extraction might happen under conditions of relatively low mixing. We just published this maybe like 2 weeks ago or something like that. And the last thing that I'm going to say is this is super interesting as well, our experiments on accelerating aging. So we are keen on trying to predict how wines are going to evolve from the perspective of their phenolic composition, aroma composition, and sensory composition, but quickly. So with these accelerating aging experiments for varieties such as Grenache and Pinot Noir, after 5 weeks of incubation, we can more or less equate 3 years of bottle aging with a relatively nice predictability, okay? And the last thing that we are doing, and I have an undergrad student working here, is on phenolic extraction on skin fermented whites. Not that orange wines are going to take the world by storm. I don't think that's going to be the case, but there is something to be said on the fact that these varieties, they do have like a very interesting phenolic composition and a completely different aromatic composition than many others. I'm particularly keen on supporting varieties with what I call Mediterranean vocation. Nick was making reference that, you know, California is a Mediterranean warm climate, and sadly it's mostly planted on Pinot Noir and Cabernet Sauvignon. But when we have so much potential with these Mediterranean varieties. And in closing, I was sitting at Unified in January in Sacramento, and I catch this slide. And the bottom line is, again, in an industry that is in a way shrinking and is struggling with engaging consumers, I'm convinced that most people mostly look at mouthfeel and texture and less so to aroma and anything else. So we really need to optimize mouthfeel, texture, and retronasal flavor. That will be my final thought. I think I did fine on time. And my last slide is to thank our sponsors. And as you can see, we have many. Without these sponsors, we are not going anywhere. So when Gianni asked me to present, and I knew that Nick and Jose will be in the audience, and people from California, I say yes, I will make it happen. I'm happy I did. And with that, Gianni, I think I'm done. You are muted.
I know. Okay, now I'm. Yeah, thank you so much, Federico. I really feel guilty with you and Nick having so much to say, and I force you to in a rush of very few minutes. But I'm sure we will come back and giving you more time to explain the fantastic work you are doing and the information you can provide. Even if we are a little late, I just have a couple of questions, one each, one for Nick and one for Federico, that I would like to ask. Nick was talking about mechanization. Of course, you have a much bigger percentage of mechanization compared to Europe, also because of the, let's say, the situation of the vineyard. But can you estimate the percentage of vineyard surface which is mechanized, and which are the operations that you mechanize right now in US?
That's a very good question. Let me start and go backwards. About somewhere between 95 and 98% of the grapes are mechanically harvested by volume. So almost all. Then if we go back through canopy management, about just under 40%, between 35 and 40% are mechanically leaf removed with no hand follow-up. Some others are mechanically leaf removed, another 10% or so are mechanically leaf removed and with some hand follow-up. So it's basically the mechanical leaf removal is done in some of the warmer areas. Some of the areas with commercial grade quality grapes, probably still the majority of the luxury, anything above $50 to $100 a bottle is probably still done by hand, but say up to between 25 and 50, more and more of that's being done mechanically. And
Wow.
then the thing that's and with vertically shoe position trellises and our current mechanical leaf removal systems, we get very close to hand level efficacy. So there's not much of a fallback there.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, I'll talk about pruning. So with almost 70% of the vineyards are mechanically pre-pruned. That means that the vineyards will be pruned with the machine to make the major cuts, and then the brush is removed with the machines, and then will have hand follow-up to come through and clean. Some kind of hedging or brushing, that's about 70% of the vineyards, according to our data, get some kind of mechanical pre-treatment before they're actually pruned by hand. And then roughly about 20% of the vineyards are box hedged, mechanically pruned with little to no hand follow-up. That's grown from about 10% a decade ago to now about 20%. But again, those vineyards would primarily be in the commercial production areas, producing wines under $15 a bottle.
Yeah, that's a huge numbers compared to what we hear here in Europe. So thank you, Nick. I have many other questions, but we have to go over. And Federico, if I can ask you, you were mentioning about fermentation temperature. And we in Europe, we have so much concern about what we call ecological transition. So meaning reducing as much as possible use of fossil source of energy. Yeah, I guess it is also a concern there. And what about the use this energy saving, let's say, in the winery? Is that something that people are very much concerned about, or is it one of the topics that they have to face?
No, absolutely. No one is going to deny that. So, Gianni, what I will say for on energy savings, I will say that we have lost to retirement the main supporter of that, I would say, concept, which is Roger Boulton. Roger has been a huge supporter of sustainability, and particularly at the winery level and energy saving. The person that is the point contact actually is now related with Jose, which is Bob Coleman at Treasury Wine Estates. He presented at Cal Poly recently like a concept of pulse. It's called pulse cooling. And that actually reduce energy or save energy like substantially. So it is, of course, a big deal. But I would say that those kind of endeavors and research on that is more, I would say, circumscribed to relatively large and corporate wineries. In this particular case, Treasury. But absolutely, that's the case. I'm happy to provide the audience with the point person. This person, Bob, is doing fantastic work at Treasury. His name is Bob Coleman.
Bob Coleman.
Yeah, super
Good.
nice guy too. And former student of Roger Boulton too.
Very good. Federico, thank you. Again, I would like to stay here a couple of hours asking you questions, but we have to move on.
Yeah, Gianni, there is one question on the chat.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't.
Maybe, yeah, just...
on which, someone is asking which are the reserve subjects in the future that you did not mention. I guess it is for Federico, but I don't know exactly.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. I can answer that very succinctly. While we are investing heavily, and again, it might be a dead end. And if it is a dead end, it's okay. You know, that's the cost of doing research. What we have been investing heavily is in trying to understand the sensor implications throughout winemaking. I'm not talking about just maceration, and the implications of this black box, which is the oxidation reduction potential. The problem with that is that you really need like a strong chemical background, particularly in organic chemistry as well, particularly when the wine is complete with alcoholic fermentation. But I have recently bought 50 redox probes, so I have been told that I'm the person that has the most redox probes in the United States. So, anyway, and the reason, Gianni, is personally what I saw is that the results are reliable. I can make sense of the results that I'm seeing, and on the top of that, some of these redox probes are so sensitive that I have seen situations in which I'm monitoring the oxidation reduction potential on a tank from my phone, and when someone takes a sample from the tank 30 miles away from my house, I can see it in the redox potential in my home.
Wow.
So that's pretty impressive. And you know, like I say, it can be at the dead end, but that's what we are exploring. We start exploring the effect of the redox potential during alcoholic fermentation, and that's the confounding factor of Saccharomyces cerevisiae, a yeast. But then we are actually expanding that throughout winemaking, if that makes sense.
That is, for example, a topic which is not extremely studied in Europe. for what I
No.
see at least. It's something quite new and will be very interesting to cross information about this topic. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Federico. I know you have to leave very soon because you are close to the time you have other things. So leave whenever you want. And thank you again. I'm sure we'll come back bothering you in other occasion because you have so much to tell us.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite, Gianni. I do have a class in 5 minutes. Thank you all. I wish I can stay, but I have to go to class.
Very good.
Bye-bye, Federico. Take care. Thank
Bye.
you, Yanni. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. So we go forward with the second block, and the second block is composed of 3 persons who are even more, let's say, into the practice, because we have the pleasure of having Brian Avila, who is a sort of bridge in between production and research, because Brian is dealing with collective applied research in California, but he will explain us what it does mean, what the Vincers Institute is doing. And welcome, Brian. Thank you for being with us. And then we have the honor of having Eric Schultz, who is Director of Winemaking at Constellation Brands and Woodbridge. And we have asked Eric to spend some time with us, telling us which are the main challenges that he's facing producing wine in US, and especially in his own facility, which is quite big, as he will explain us. But it's not only big facilities, it's also small and medium facility. So we also asked Jose Alberto Santos, who is Vice President Enology and Viticulture at the Dow Family Estate, which has been recently became part of the Treasury Wine Estate. And so he's placed in Paso Robles area, which is close to San Luis Obispo in the Central Coast. And he may have different challenges, may not. So we hear from the 3. Same principle. Please take your 10-minute maximum for your talk, and then we will have some answer question at the end. Brian, would you like to start this block?
Yeah, let's do it. And so, okay, let me just get my desktop set up here.
We see your slide is fine.
Good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so yeah, we're Vintners Institute, Academy and Guild. So I'm going to basically, my name is Brian Avila. See if I have a little intro slide here.
Brian, can you ask you to approach the microphone, because when you are outside away, we can hear you a little better. Okay.
Okay, is this any better?
Yeah,
okay,
thank you.
Good. Okay. Okay, so we're Vintners Institute is a guild and an academy, right? So guilds are not new, been around since the 1400s, but the online platform is new. We've also got a workforce training academy, and mainly because we know that labor in California is tight, to say the least. And so, long story short, what we do is our specialty is really servicing, I would say, small and medium-sized wineries throughout California and really the United States, but starting with California. We just got started in 2022. We beta tested this system with a small group of growers or winemakers and viticulturists in 2022. We did the paid version in 2023, and we recently created an alliance with Family Winemakers of California. So what we do is our guild connects with the state trade organizations, and we manage their technical needs through our guild. And we're also delivering that workforce training. So that's the main goal here, right? So the guild is coming up with collective research. They're coming up with best practices, not yet new or best practices. Sorry, guilds coming up with practices that are new. As they become best practices, these can be put into the academy. And some of this stuff is like climate smart stuff, right? So we can't necessarily wait for every little tidbit of climate smart information to be, to go through a university process. At some point, we've got to start putting this stuff into the curriculum for the workforce to start doing this work on the ground. So that's really what we're trying to do here, is bring those skills to the front line. So this workforce training academy is for la gente. Our goal is to give these courses in English and Spanish. And so you can see these two relationships have a lot of symbiosis, right? We've got the guild members, which are comprised of the employers. We're doing collective applied research. And as these new ideas are more adopted, then they can go into the academy. And then our guild and employers can hire these people, these new recruits, if you will. So that's our attempt at helping to, inspire innovation for small and medium-sized wineries, and to help to develop the workforce for these little guys. Because we really believe in diversity, biodiversity, but also business diversity, right? For a lot of smaller entrepreneurs. So we provide a wine growing technology certificate, and this is just a quick shot of the types of things we're looking at. We'll be going after apprenticeship programs, but essentially, we'll just cut to the chase here. We don't have a lot of time. We've got 4 classes. We've got an intro, 4 seasons of grape growing, 7 seasons of winemaking, selling with a sense of place, and the whole idea is to produce cross-trained entry-level workers, right? That can hopefully get a livable wage and can be able to flex between maybe the tasting room or event staff, right, to maybe the vineyard or to the cellar. That way somebody can get a job and stay there versus having to be temporary labor. So we're trying to work on this labor force issue a bit. And stay posted, because we're going to announce our new instructors in about 2 weeks here. So that's pretty exciting. We've got bilingual instructors coming on board that are absolutely ninjas in their fields. So this is the guild. And so our goal is, right now we've been, the very first year we started working with wineries from Washington State, California to Texas. And what we're doing is at this point, right, it's 2024. We've refined this process a bit since 2022, where we are looking to plug into all these state level trade organizations that are either vintner or grower associations. Owners can participate in this type of leadership, and also the technical leads. And we feel like it's important for the owners to be involved with this technical aspect, because otherwise, it's really tough for the winemakers and viticulturists to have these little pet projects on the side and do things that suppliers want them to do without getting that really top leadership buy-in. So, yeah, we're committed to collective applied research and technical problem solving and innovation. So these are things that we can share, right? If you're planting vineyards where you can harvest bottles right off the plants, don't tell us about it. We're going to tell everybody. Excuse me. So what we have and what we started with, and this is really I would say third that I've had some work with, but even since the California Enological Research Association, these collective type organizations have been trying to get some legs for a really long time. So this is probably about the 4th iteration that I'm familiar with. And there's been some chinks in the armor from some of those previous ones. And so the most important thing for us is really to gain trust, right? So our customers are growers and vintners. And we've been very strict on that. And one way that we've been able to get some of this loyalty is through, really kind of doing this in a democratic process. So we've got this guild forum, and we use what we call the sphere process. And essentially what we're doing is is we talk to our guild members, we have them submit our ideas, we prioritize the ideas by vote, we design the experiment, we analyze the sensory together, we just get together and we have expert winemakers and viticulturists tasting these wines and providing their take. And then we put together, we compile a report from all these folks and we share it with the guild. And that's the main purpose there, is letting them have this unbiased research forum where they get to set the direction and they get to, you know, based on their pain points, they're able to really prioritize, you know, what they want to work on. And I'll share some of those pain points with you here. So we got what we call the long list, right? So let's see, I'm just going to run some of these down. This was what went onto the ballot. These were all ideas about what wineries in California suggested. So we don't come to them with an order of what to study. They gave it to us. We created a ballot and we let people vote on what we wanted to do together collectively. Okay. So this went to ballot. We've got oak aging, we've got non-PVPP and vegan fining agents. People are less interested in microplastics and looking for vegan opportunities. Always interested in new microbiology, malolactic bacteria trials. There was Lactobacillus plantarum. We had, you know, always a lot of interested in bioprotectants, micro-ox, and so on. A lot of sustainability type projects came up, like carbon farm planning with our RCDs here. Like RCD means regional conservation districts. So these are connected distantly with the USDA, which funds some of the state level conservation districts and so on. Barrel trial sharing, winemakers always want to trial barrels just because it's delicious and there's a lot of them out there. Closures, biologicals. So anyway, you get the idea. If you want more information on this, of course, you know, you could reach out. But this was the short list. This is what we decided to do together. So barrel trial sharing. So all the wineries that got a new barrel and had a control, you know, a neutral barrel, we brought them together. We tasted them in pop-up forums. So rather than hosting big expensive meetings, we just coordinate whose winery we're going to show up. We show up at. We bust out these tastings. We invite folks to come throughout the day, and they give us our data, and then we compile their sensory results and give it back to them. So non-Saccharomyces yeast is very big. Obviously, if you can take sugar and turn it into acid in California, that's a nice, you know, climate proofing type thing to do. Alternative white juice fining was interesting. Alcoholic fermentation yeast, there's a lot of interest in those on an ongoing basis. And then some self-sufficiency trials with regards to, you know, stems versus cluster inclusion. So, you know, like Federico was talking about, you know, adding stems to the fermenter. What's a good practice? What percentage? So this was kind of driven by our Central Coast crew and some of the North Coast folks, where we just, you know, we did stem trials and cluster trials. So this year, with our fresh relationship with Family Winemakers of California, they're a lobbying group. And so we're really looking to help to, you know, impact change for small and medium growers. So we're integrating some of our technical capability along with some of the legislative capability within this group so that we could really listen to the owners and get active on solving their pain points. And as the technical issues, as some of these legislative issues require some technical needs, we can deliver some of that to the legislative group and work together. And so this coming year, we're going to be putting together a Think Tank 2025, which is going to be essentially a monthly tour where we're listening to pain points of these vintners. We're going to get together. We're going to taste wine. We're going to have fun. We're going to talk trash about wines and wine industry problems. And we're going to build some level of trust and have some, you know, really just some great conversations about problem solving so that we can develop these legislative and technical action plans, you know, that they're putting forward, right? And then we're going to create a 2030 strategic plan. So our goal is to really unite these small vintners and growers and strengthen some of the diversity in the wine industry here. And that's what we're doing.
Good.
So thank you very much, Johnny, for
No,
letting us present.
thank you, Brian, because that's something that we don't have in Europe, at least done in this way. And the fact that there is this attention to the small family-owned wineries, which is the normality here, the great majority of family or of great majority of wineries in Europe are actually family-owned and very small, much smaller than yours probably. So that's something that sounds very interesting, and I'm sure that it will be your presentation going to be a source of further contact later on. We are accumulating some delay, so I go to Eric immediately. Eric, thank you for being with us. Can you give us some hints from your standpoint?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I just want to say, Gianni, thank you, and Domingo for making this connection. Happy to be here today. I would have liked to have been in person, but I understand we can't do that. So hopefully you find something informative I give you today. Before I got into challenges, I wanted to, because we're not in person, I wanted to give you a little background of the winery. So Woodbridge Winery, it's near the city of Lodi. It's about 50 kilometers south of the capital city of Sacramento. It was built in 1932 in anticipation of the repeal of Prohibition. And I'm sure at the time, people were optimistic about what the market would be like there. Fast forward to 1979 was when Robert Mondavi, sorry, something's popping up here. Robert Mondavi purchased the winery in 1979 and really that was the start of what he wanted to create, of what he saw in his travels in Europe. And that was an everyday table wine. You have to imagine at the time in California, a lot of the wines were fortified. There were things like sherry. Some of them were very sweet. So he wanted to make what would eventually become a varietal-based table wine. 1980s was a period of really slow growth, but it was the introduction of what I'm calling quality thinking by the team there. So things like Mueller jacketed tanks that they borrowed from dairies. It was the first Wilms tank presses at the winery. Prior to that, everything was very aggressively handled. It was crushed and run through continuous presses and things like that. So good start of quality thinking. 1992 was the initial public offering for Robert Mondavi Corporation. That, along with the whole 60 Minutes French paradox, red wine is good for you thing, marked a period of very fast growth. That was, at the time, people looking at what was going to be the best way to handle red fermentations at the winery. So a lot of cap management projects going on, pulse air systems, rotaries, and kind of what we settled on, which are 200-ton fermenters, about 2,300 hectoliter size tanks. And we've got a mix of air mixing and automated pump over on that. And then from 2019, really, of course, through COVID, marked a period of tremendous change. So we added 4 packaging lines to the winery. We brought on capabilities of what we call RTD, or ready to drink, and also built a Charmat cellar capable of packaging 75,000 cases of sparkling a week. So a lot of change. I bring all this background up because the winery is really a patchwork of eras, and it's not, necessarily the most efficient or well thought out situation for us. So that's a challenge in and of itself. For crush capacity, on average, we crush about 150,000 tons a year. The mix is about 95,000 tons of whites and 55,000 tons of reds. We've got 28 presses on site. Most of them are banks of 8 260 hectoliter presses. They're sized that way because that's about what a 25-ton truck will handle. So everything's kind of first in, first out, and we do a lot of separation of vineyard blocks, varieties, any kind of winemaking trials we have, and things like that. When we get going, we can do about 110 loads a day of white, and that again, that's a 25-ton load. And when we get into reds, we can do about 90 loads a day, and then we get down onto a 5-day crush week, which equates to about 11,000 tons a week that we need to get through. We crush and make all the fruit for the Woodbridge brand and for the Cook's sparkling brand. So those are two primary things we do. We also support other brands for the company by making components out of Lodi fruit for those brands. And then typically crush starts August 1st and will go into the beginning of November. So about 3 months. Capacity of the winery, we're sitting around 68 million gallons or 257 million liters, if I did that math right. Winemaking team at the site is a big team. We've got 7 winemakers on what we call the grape to bottle side. So that's what I'm in charge of. And then 5 on the production side. So that would include sparkling, ready to drink, and a lot of other like packaging related duties. This year we're set to do about 18 million cases in a year, and that's about 60,000 cases a day that we produce. Again, we brought on capabilities to do ready to drinks. That includes a DSP or distilled spirits plant. So that's grain neutral spirits, tequila. We make a brand called Austin Cocktails. They're pour over cocktails in a can. So that's kind of something again in the last 5 years that we've turned on. And then we're a main bottling facility for the company, handling brands like Mayomi, Kim Crawford, and Robert Mondavi Private Selection. So obviously a lot going on at the winery, a lot of challenges. But when you ask for 3 or 4 challenges, I'm considering like just the winemaking of still wine. So like, what are our main obstacles to creating a process and having the best quality outcome for our still wine? First, I'll start with 2 just kind of general or more vague challenges, I guess we have, and then I'll get into specifics. The first one, really just over the years, is the changing business demands. And now some of those maybe are self-imposed changes, but other those are market changes. That's just the way the crush plan changes over the years. So we have well-defined, uses for certain cooperage where we, for example, like ferment Chardonnay in. We've got certain tanks that we press and clarify juice out of. And when the business plan swings one way or the other, it's really like a year of learning how to adapt to that. So we're trying to get better at how we look at that and how we model crush and how we think it's going to come in, so that we can anticipate some of those aspects of moving things around, rather than having the issue and dealing with it firsthand. A good example again is so 3 years ago was marked when we brought on the Cooks, making the base wine for Cooks. We did kind of a small trial that year, and then the second year we went to about 30,000 tons, and it displaced a lot of Chardonnay, Pinot Grigio, these other varieties, in the winery. So in addition to having harvest be a learning every year and how you have to deal with the different conditions when you have different programs taking up your resources, then you have to kind of think of those things. So that's one. The second one I'll mention that Nick mentioned as well is labor. I can't go without saying labor. What I'll say about labor though is it's not for us necessarily finding people to work. I think it's about training and education. And I think that the workforce, much of the equipment we have now is very complex and very modern compared to some of the way it was in the past. And that's great. And I think, oftentimes when we talk about automation, it's kind of going to solve all our labor problems, but what we're seeing is with these very complex things, you need a better skill set of how to deal with it. So that includes the vendor relationship, the service agreements we have, and then also, again, just the employees, their knowledge of that equipment. And, goes without saying, obviously, if you have turnover, you've spent a lot of time training somebody and then they leave and these type of things. So labor is certainly something we're thinking about. And then last, I'll just finish with a couple of specific challenges we have. Brian mentioned oak alternatives. So we're not, for the Woodbridge brand, we don't use any barrels. We're entirely, staves and chips. And I think the massive amount of loading and unloading those in tanks. So oak is a really important part of the sensory character of our wines we make. And getting that done on a timely basis, and also just with some of the large coopers we have, getting the sensory impact we want out of the oak is a really big issue. We've talked over with, we've done trials in the past with, the idea of like extraction vessels and again, automating, pumping things through, and those were relatively successful, but they didn't scale up for us to the amount we need. And then last specific challenge that we're thinking about a lot is how we recover volume from our lees streams. Again, we probably 4 years ago or so, we made the decision to get away from diatomaceous earth, so the rotary drum vacuum filters that everybody's used for years. We don't have those anymore, so we're on things like high salts crossflows. We have 3 new decanting centrifuges to handle some of that really heavy, and it's thinking about all these lee streams for us. With whites and reds, we do probably 30 plus different varieties, trying to keep things somewhat separate. I'd say there's, like 3 or 4 basic streams. So there's juice lees, heavy white yeast lees type of thing, heavy red lees, and then maybe bentonite lees. So keeping all those separate and getting them recovered on a timely basis is something we're working on. So that's about all I got, Gianni. I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, fantastic, Rick. A lot of good input. I have so many questions myself, and I see some other coming in. But let's finish the block, end up the block with Jose. Jose, you probably have a different standpoint and different vision from your position compared to what Eric was explaining. And thank you, Eric, also for giving the context where you are working, because very helpful to understand your needs. Jose.
Good morning, everybody, and Gianni and Gracie, thank you for the invite. Regarding your last question, there are some points that align. So I think that even despite the size of the operations, we share some of the same concerns. Just a little bit of background about DAO. So DAO Vineyards was founded in 2007 by brothers Daniel and George Dow. And we are based in the Adelaide district of Paso Robles. So we are in, let's say, a cooler area within this recognized as mostly warm climate area. Most of our vineyards are mountainous vineyards, and we are at right now I'm at 670 meters of altitude, and we are also quite close to the ocean, so we are just like 24 kilometers from the ocean. This, let's say, location allows us to be, let's say, 5 to 6 degrees Celsius cooler than, let's say, downtown Paso. So we definitely benefit of a little bit of a cooler climate, but we still face, let's say, the same challenges brought by climate change with heat waves and having some days, especially during harvest, of 38 or 39 or even 40 degrees for consecutive 3, 4, 5 days. So that still remains a big challenge. Just as an additional piece of background, and I have the same issue as you, Gianni, that they were thinking that I was speaking in French. Sorry, I need to turn off the notes. Just a little bit of background. We have mainly Bordeaux varietals, so 98% of what we plant are Bordeaux varietals. And as I mentioned, we are in mountainous terrain, so that brings a little bit of other challenges. So in terms of the challenges that we have, I would say that most of them are related with climate change and probably getting enough staff and qualified staff here. And I would say that a lot of the innovations that we seek are related with our commitment as a company in trying to do our part in mitigating climate change. As you mentioned, we are since December last year part of Treasury Wine Estates, and being part of Treasury, this definitely aligned our common goals, and we are now basically we have very bold climate targets that includes achieving by the end of this year net zero carbon emissions by the end of 2024, which is a very ambitious goal. And as a first step for this journey, we will be powering our operations with 100% renewable energy by the end of this year. Within the Treasury Winery network, we already have a lot of solar installations. So we have already 3 megawatts, and we are counting, and we expect that by the end of this year, we will double that. And upon the completion of the project, and I would say end of 2024 or 2025, we will have, let's say, 60% of the energy needs of our facilities covered by solar. And the remainder, we are trying to buy as much as possible green power. And when needed, we will have to use renewable energy credits to mitigate this deficiency. We are also trying to electrify as much as possible our fleet and getting away from the use of fossil fuels, but in the specific case of the sorry, I need to drink some water. In the specific case of the Dow Mountain, let's say electric tractors and everything and autonomous vehicles are quite challenging, and these are still not an option. Regarding our vineyards, some of the main challenges that we face are related with water use and water preservation, and also trying to find ways to make our vineyards more resilient to heat stress. We already farm all our vineyards organically, and we already have CIF certification for one of our vineyards, and we are getting in the process of getting certified California sustainable for the vineyard and the winery. So the sustainability is definitely a key point for us. We also pay very close attention to the use of water. So we carefully monitor our water use, and we try to find opportunities for efficiency and reduction. We developed here for the Dow Mountain a specific AI irrigation model that allows us to determine specifically on a block basis what are the irrigation needs, and try to basically do as much as possible deficit irrigation and only use water when and where it's needed. And we also have here some ongoing projects to capture rainwater and to use reclaimed water to minimize extraction, basically groundwater extractions for our vineyard operations. One thing that we tried, and actually this last vintage, we actually produced the first wine made with what is defined as a drought resistant and water stress resistant variety. So we made our first wine out of Arena Noah, which is a cross between Cabernet Sauvignon and Tannat. The wine is beautiful, by the way, but definitely we still need to assess if this is actually a solution. So I would say that definitely from a vineyard component, trying to look at cross of different varieties to find more resistant grape varieties will be definitely important. On the soil management front, let's say, we try, as I said, we are organic, and we try to execute practices that help us to maintain the soils healthy and vibrant, and and also to promote as much as we can the biodiversity of the ecosystems are in our, let's say, producing soils, but also in the terrain around. I didn't mention this initially, but in the total properties, we have 850 acres roughly, of which we have 400 acres that are planted and currently producing only, let's say, close to 300 are producing this year. The remainder will get in full production next year. But definitely keeping this biodiversity and keeping the healthy soils is key for us to improve resiliency of the vineyards, but also to help us to preserve water. And also, in particular this year, we started to implement some technologies to monitor and measure the presence of pests and any diseases. So to also limit even though we are farming organically and we are using only organic chemicals, we try to limit as much as possible the use of chemicals. Again, because we are at the top of a mountain with very steep hills, mechanization of our vineyards is still very challenging. And let's say as an opportunity for some of the listeners in this call, we would like not only to be able to mechanize some of the practices that are a little bit work intensive or may have some hazard potential around it, but also try to minimize as much the staffing shortage that we start facing. One note regarding Treasury, they have already made a lot of work in equipping our fleet up north in Napa using autonomous vehicles, and that basically already replace man-driven vehicles for a lot of the operations. But again, due to the terrain that we have, these technologies cannot be used here. At the winery level, I would say that mainly the major challenge that I think we face is are related with reducing the need for cooling of musts. Our enological approach includes cold soaking for normally 2 to 3 days to achieve the maximum potential and to extract the maximum potential from our grapes. That requires that we have to cool down the grapes to very low temperatures, and we try to mitigate this a little bit by harvesting at night and keeping the grapes as cold as possible before processing them. But when we have days that may be at 40 degrees Celsius and we can't really process the grapes right away, this becomes a little bit challenging. So I would say that definitely if there are some technologies out there that can allow us in an effective way to replace cold soak while achieving similar enological results will be fantastic. As well, systems that can help us optimize the efficiency of existing and installed chilling systems. This can be a game changer. As Federico mentioned, Bob Coleman, that is our research winemaker that is based at Beringer in Napa, is already working with pulse system for the glycol systems for the chilling, to try to optimize this and to really only use energy when needed. But I think that there are definitely opportunities here. Additionally, our wines are 100% aged in barrels. So all our wines for all the estate and reserve tier are aged in barrel, which means that we keep this in large rooms with temperature and humidity control. We are doing a lot of work to try to optimize the temperature and humidity management using sensing technologies already. But I think that there are still opportunities in that. Just to finalize and not wanting to steal too much time, on talking a little bit about packaging and waste. We try to reduce as much as possible the impact on landfills and trying to reduce our waste and where possible reuse or recycle a lot of the waste that we produce. So currently, all our pumice is sent to a local composting site, and it's converted into compost that can be used in farming. Effectively starting this year, and mainly because of our organic certification, we will be able to start using the pumice that is produced by the compost that is produced by the pumice from our vineyards. So we will have some circularity here. But even though this is already a great use of this waste, we think that there are opportunities in bringing or extracting more value from this waste. So technologies that may be available to either extract polyphenolic compounds or to make energy, to do other things out of these waste will be great. On the packaging side, let's say, we historically have, and for those that know Dow, we historically have heavier glass packaging. We are definitely already actively looking for ways to reduce the weight while keeping the look and feel of our packaging. At the same time, we are committed to make sure that all the glass that we use has the highest percentage possible of recycled glass to try to reduce that component. And also in terms of the packaging, try to do all the rest of the packaging, try to do to use products that are either recyclable, reusable, or compostable. Just to finalize, we have in terms of, let's say, all new product development and everything, we try to include as much as possible this mindset of sustainability and keeping the, let's say, waste mitigation in mind. And so every new product that we develop has this mindset behind. So, and that will be it for me.
Wow, Jose, a lot of challenges. No, thank you. You have been a very, very precious contribution. And actually, there are many points, or some points are totally identical to what we have in Europe, and you know also very well Europe situation.
Yeah.
Some others, I would say, are quite specific. Like for instance, all the sustainability, biodiversity is something in Europe we talk about, but I'm not sure that so many wineries are really deeply into that engagement. We are getting very late because we still have a block and we are supposed to finish it. But there is one point that has been mentioned both by Eric and by Brian, which is the not so much the labor force, but the trained labor force. That brings me to, I don't know if it is a question or a comment, but so it's not only the fact that you need people, but you need people who are able to use certain machines. So even when you make automation, you need something which must be extremely simple and extremely user-friendly in its use, because you don't have time actually to train people, and then with the big turnover. Is that correct, Eric? Is one of the criteria when you look at the machinery, for example?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, again, the software on the machines is great, but when somebody's in there kind of maybe doing something they don't know what they're doing, or they're pushing buttons, and and then you have issues that come up, and then we're calling vendors to come and support and those type of things. And it really just, what I failed to mention too, but a lot of our processes are just in time prior to bottling. So we don't have a lot of time. So if there's suddenly an issue, it causes a lot of downtime on our line, which obviously, we don't want a lot of people standing around with nothing, no lines to run. So
yeah, big issue. And so I think, Brian, that when you talk about training of your workers, you must include the fact of train them to use machines. It's not just only handwork, but that is not going to be very easy with the variety of solution, mechanical and the digital solution that you have now on the market.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the machines, the first thing is to teach people how to speak the language of what they're doing in the first place, right? Whether we're crushing stuff or filtering stuff or finding something, right? If they don't know what wine is or the chemicals that they're treating or what the application's all about, they don't have a framework for learning, right? So if we teach people how to fish, right, figuratively speaking, teach them about, vineyard basics, winery basics, tasting room basics, right? If we teach them how to think for themselves, when they go to read Della Tavola ceramic cross-flow machine versus molecularly imprinted polymers or something like that, at least, for starters, we know what part of the winemaking phase we're talking about, what part of maybe viticulture we're talking about, so they can speak the language and learn faster, right? The suppliers can send you a YouTube video on machine operation, but if you don't know which questions to ask your supplier because you don't understand the technology, that's pretty tough. So we start with language.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, one point that is very key in Europe that you did not raise up because I don't know if if it's not a problem, is the age of people, especially working in the vineyard, which is a big issue here in Europe because most of them are the old generations and there's not so many young people going in. So that's an obstacle sometimes, even within innovation, not only cultural, but just to understand the new tools and so on. I'm really sorry I have to pass to the other block, not because it's less interesting, but because I really would like to stay here discussing for hours with you guys. But we have now the last two panelists, and I also thank very much George and Domingo because they have been helping us and the EPAWI project also in the past with some activities. So thank you so much for being here and for giving support to us. And we asked Domingo Rodriguez, in being the secretary of Enology Supplies Organization and having a very long experience, many years of experience in the wine industry, to tell us something more about how the goods, the machinery, the products are distributed in US. Which is the system that might be, of course, very interesting for some European suppliers or innovators. And George, who is the CEO of Wine Industry Network, is an organizer of a trade show. He has a very strong communication tool, so he may give us some insight on media and trade shows in terms of communicating innovation in the US market. Same system. You have 10 minutes. Please try to stay into the 10 minutes, and then we will go with some question and answer at the end. Mingo, would you like to start on?
All right, thank you, Gianni. Thank you very much for having me. And I'm going to look at the US wine industry. You had quite a bit of information on the viticulture side, what's happening, and some other technical aspects from the university. And what I'd like to do is just look how the US wine industry is set up and made up. And so we're just going to quickly review who ESO is, the Enological Supply Organization. We are made up of 8 suppliers in the North American wine industry, and we cover pretty much 100% of all the wineries through either distributors or directly selling enological products or technologies to the wineries. In addition, ESO also collaborates with other organizations like FIFS or Inopia in Europe. And we also support the process to improve the US regulatory products process for approval. And we try to support the winemaking community as well. Next, we're going to have a look at the lay of the land in the United States, what the wineries look like, production, case volume, and how much is actually concentrated in California. The other aspect is how can you strategically approach the US wine industry? What are the challenges? How is it made up? What are the legal, I would say, frameworks like the TTB? And what industry resources can you look up yourself to get a better understanding of the US wine industry and how it's made up? Then just quickly for some of you that might not be familiar with our industry, since I'm talking to a European audience, the United States is made up of 50 states. We measure everything in gallons. So 1 gallon has 3.785 liters. Everything, the statistics are mainly given in cases. So each case has 12 bottles of 750 milliliters, or the equivalent of 9 liters. And one case is the equivalent of about 2.37 gallons. And I'll let you calculate the 2.37 gallons to liters. All right, let's dive into the presentation. So what you see here is statistics of the US wine industry in 2023. I have this as the latest information. So we have about 11,600 wineries throughout the entire United States. And if you can see, we have about 42% of the wineries that are located in California. You see a big drop off here from the 4,900 or almost 5,000 wineries down to the next largest state, which is Oregon, followed by Washington and Texas. And then it really dramatically drops. And then the rest of the states make up about 2,000 wineries. So you have California, Oregon, Washington, Texas, and New York as, I would say, your most important states when it comes to wineries, volumes, and purchasing power. So let's have a look at what the case production is of the entire United States. So we have over 300 million cases that come in that are produced in the United States. We have an import amount of about 136 million, so not insignificant. It's a good chunk that we are importing: France, Italy, Spain, and then a combined of 364 million cases. I've put up there also what the actual bottle count is, which might be more familiar to you from Europe. Again, if you look at what the actual production is in the United States, California accounts for 86% of total production. So that's a huge amount. We have 42% of total wineries and over 86% combined, which also includes Oregon, Washington, Texas, and New York. But keep in mind that those volumes, as you saw earlier, we have 7%, 8%, 4% in Texas, and 4% in New York. So if you then go further and you just look at what the California production is, it is enormous. Look at the amount. We're coming close to 300 million cases. So if you look at that, where you want to focus is really California, Washington, New York, and Oregon, and I would say Texas as well as an emerging, growing market in the US wine industry. If you look at case volume, we have over 11,600 wineries. However, over half of that, almost half of that, is actually a very small production facility, so below 1,000 cases. Then if you go the next case level up, 1,000 cases to 5,000 cases, you come up to like 32%, and all the way at the bottom, wineries that are larger than 500,000 cases are only 76 wineries. So these are the Constellations, these are the Gallows, Treasury Wine Estates, and some other large wineries. However, if you break this down, we'll have a quick look at the top 20 wineries. So out of those 76 wineries to produce more than 500,000 cases, I'm just taking the top 20 wineries in California alone, and they alone make up 75% of total production. So again, you see a steep decline in production numbers from Gallo down to the wine group. So we're going from 100 million cases down to over 40, 50 million cases. And then you can see how this really peters out. It diminishes in case volumes. Here by number 50, we might be at 500,000, 550,000 cases, 600,000 cases. And this is a very interesting slide, in my opinion, because if you're trying to introduce a new technology that is dependent on a lot of wine volume, then your target audience is very, very small. If it is a technology that is targeting all wineries, then you can go and approach all markets, all states that have wineries. Again, California with over 4,800 wineries would be your biggest market. How do you overcome the challenges in the United States, and what are you looking at in challenges? So the United States is about over 2 times larger than Europe and produces about 8 times less wine. So that means you need to cover a lot of territory from California to Texas or over to New York. Those are long distances. The top 5 states produce 95% of all the wine. They're predominantly over on the West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington. Again, that's a big territory to cover. And then within those states, again, California produces 86% of all of the wine and has over 46% of all wineries located in California. And mind yourself, top to bottom, California, it's about a 12, 14-hour drive. Then the other interesting aspect, like I mentioned earlier, 1% of the wineries in the United States produce 90% of all of the wine that is produced in the United States. So how do you approach something like that? You know, how do you find a collaborator? How do you break into the market? So you can reach out to some of the suppliers. You can reach out to me. I can connect you with anybody within the ESO organization. But if you go through a supplier, you have to have a pretty much well finished product, and you need to be market ready. You have to be able to launch it. The benefits, obviously, regional sales staff, there's existing marketing channels and brand recognition. The other aspect that you could do is you enter the market by yourself. You do the sales by yourself, marketing, all of that. You end up having more control, but you also will have to work harder to cover all of the territory, and your upfront costs most likely are going to be higher as well. It goes without saying that if you choose a supplier, you will have a lower margin than if you sell direct. The other thing also is a very, very interesting aspect, and I think the previous speaker, Eric, with Woodbridge, is one of the larger wineries, but often these larger wineries allow you to collaborate with them and sometimes even help you develop a product and break into the market. So there are even smaller or mid-sized wineries that might be interested in developing a product and or help you start a specific project or a pilot program. So, and last but not least, universities always. They are very interested in collaborating, like Cal Poly that we had early on in the morning. UC Davis, Sonoma State might be also interested. Some of those wineries are seeking collaborations and new ideas. So you have several channels that you can use to get into the market. And depending on your product, depending on your resources, financial, human resources, one or the other might apply to you better. In that sense, what you're going to face once you get into the market are some of the regulatory restrictions or guidelines that you have to overcome. If it's an additive or a product that goes into the wine or that touches wine, it could be membranes. You're going to have to go through the FDA and then through the TTB. This can be a fairly lengthy process. And like I said, if you have a supplier that helps, they can help you with that. If you collaborate with a winery, they also might be very instrumental in doing that, and or a university. If you do it yourself, you will require legal advice, some support, consultants. Within ESO, we have some specialists that are focused on the TTB and the FDA that can also help out for new products. If it's, what would I say, software technology or hardware, this doesn't require approval. So it would really just be for products that touch or go into the wine. What you see on this slide is the actual process all the way to the rulemaking, which then finally approves new products and technologies in the wine industry. This can take years. The last rulemaking we had took over 8 years or 10 years. So it's a steep prospect. Here again, ESO is working with other organizations to improve that process, and hopefully we can bring it down to about 2 years. But don't get discouraged by this. Again, bring in your technologies, and right here in the administrative approval, this is for domestic use and approval that you can use that would apply to all of the US wineries. Final rulemaking has to do with export to the EU. All right. With that, some industry resources. The Wine Institute represents California wineries. Wine America both in organizations, they're very, very good in supporting the wineries. Wine America does all the states, represents all wineries. Then I would say gold standard in industry data, industry research is Silicon Valley Bank, and they put out an annual wine industry report that you can download. So if you click on the link there, you can download the latest report on the industry. And they also do a direct-to-consumer report once a year. So two very, very important reports that the whole wine industry usually waits for and eagerly waits and reads. Then in terms of marketing your product, if you have a technology or a product that you want to market and want to see how other suppliers do their marketing, there is Wine Industry Network, and you will get a good presentation and introduction to Wine Industry Network after my presentation, and Wine Business Monthly. Those are, I would say, the two main marketing channels that you would see here in North America. I would include even Canada with that. And you have two industry data channels. That's Wine Industry Data and Wine Analytics. Wine Analytics you have to pay for. It's a bit expensive, but they have I think they have pretty much most of the wineries in all states, and then Wine Industry Data as well. Very good. It's more affordable. Like I said, these are marketing channels, the main ones, I would say, and the Wine Institute and Wine America gives you a good overview how the wine industry moves through the year and what their challenges are in the industry. I hope that with this information, you can do a little bit of research. I hope it helps you understand a little bit the market, the US winemaker market. And I would say, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer whatever comes my way.
Thank you so much, Domingo. And let's listen to George now.
All right. Well, thank you, Gianni, for having me. Very much appreciate being a part of the conversation today. Again, my name is George Christie. I'm with Wine Industry Network. And just as a bit of background, my wine career started really on the winery side of things. And about 2009 or so, I went off and I started working with industry vendors. Initially, the idea was to create a better online directory for winery people to find the products and services that they needed. At that point, we just had a big print directory, and obviously print directories were going away. So we launched basically an online directory, and that we quickly realized that that wasn't enough to help our industry vendors or our wineries. We really needed to introduce more of a direct marketing component to our business, very much the way that on the winery side have been shifting their marketing efforts to market their products or their wines directly to the consumer. We started to apply a similar logic to how we promoted the vendors that we work with. That quickly morphed into adding an editorial site. We realized that wineries were not searching for products and services on a daily basis, but they were interested in consuming news on a daily basis. So that led us down the path of launching the Wine Industry Advisor, which is our editorial site. After that, we realized, building on what we had learned about people wanting to consume news, we realized it was really important for us to get into the educational part of our industry. And so from there, we launched a trade show here in the North Coast. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about trade shows where we could actually drive more interaction between our winery and vineyard professionals with the vendors that we work closely with. The trade show part was incredibly important. But what we learned was that what really brought the decision makers out was the educational piece, was the conference. And the big eye-opening experience that we learned, the big learning for us when we started doing our conferences is that our best resource for education wasn't necessarily other wineries, but it was the vendors that we work with. And so, to kind of go back to the companies that Domingo put up on his slide that are part of his organization, we work with all of those companies, and all of those companies at one point or another have worked very closely with us to develop our conference sessions, especially the ones that are targeting our winemaking community. But we do the same thing for our sales and marketing sessions, our vineyard sessions, and our sessions that we're focused on general leadership. So for new companies that are looking to come into the industry, I guess I'll start with on the media side. It's changed a lot, just like every other industry. 10 years ago, there were 4 or 5, actually, I think 5 different wine business focused magazines. Now there's one. Wine Business Monthly is really kind of the last man standing in the print publication world. And I suspect that they probably have their issues. It's just very tough. People don't really want to consume information that way anymore. But they're the last ones that are out there, and I think they do an excellent job with their editorial. On the trade show front, probably the best thing that you can do if you want to just to drive some engagement and get yourself out there. The biggest trade show that we have here in the States is Unified Grape and Wine Symposium. It's held at the end of January every year in Sacramento. It's really the closest thing we have to an international show, and still small in comparison to what happens in Europe. But it is our biggest trade show of the year. Following that, we've got some really, I think, important regional trade shows. The show that the trade show and conference that Wine Industry Network puts on is called the North Coast Wine Industry Expo. It really targets Northern California, Sonoma County, Napa County, Mendocino, Lake counties, probably the greatest concentration of wineries in the U.S. So it's become a really important trade show and conference for vendors who are targeting these areas. Definitely something that you definitely want to have on your list. The other big show in California, regional trade show, is YVI. It's in Paso Robles each year. I think it's usually in March or April. Another terrific show targeting the Central Coast, very well attended. And if that's a region that you're interested in, you'll definitely want to be participating in YVI. Following that, Oregon Wine Symposium is a great show for the Oregon wine audience. The Washington Wineries and Vineyard Association has a really good trade show. The Texas Wine and Grape Growers Association, another terrific trade show for the Texas region. And then the last one that I would mention is the Eastern Wine Exposition. It obviously targets the Eastern wine industry here in the United States. And every other year they switch locations. So they're either in Pennsylvania or they're in upstate New York. So those are the main shows that I would get on your radar if you're looking to have a presence here in the United States, for sure. The other thing that I would pitch at the risk of making this terribly self-serving is to look at what we do here at the Wine Industry Network. We basically created a system that allows us to push content out to a robust list of subscribers. So we've got about 40,000 subscribers that receive our either our daily news or our product and service news, which we break out into different categories to make it more relevant to our audience. So we've got product and service news focused on winemaking, vineyard operations, sales and marketing, and again, strategy, leadership. That tends to be more of our professional services companies that we work with, attorneys, accountants, compliance companies, etc. Overall, we work with about between 500 and 600 companies a year that are either on our online platform or at our trade shows. And the biggest thing that we try to do here at Wine Industry Network is, our overarching objective is to be the best business resource we can be for the wine industry. and regardless of what your role is. So if you are on the winery or vineyard side, we want you to look at us as a source of information for news, product and new products, new services that you should try to be aware of. For the vendors that we work with, a lot of what we do is to help drive awareness for what they're doing. One of the big things that we've learned over the years is, we talk a lot about innovation in the wine industry, and while certainly there is a lot of that is happening, at the winery and the vineyard. In a lot of cases, it's our industry vendors that are really driving the innovation. Wineries are busy, trying to grow better grapes, make better wine, and obviously move those boxes through their different sales channels. But it's often the vendors that they go to when they're trying to find efficiencies in irrigation, or how to impact quality in the cellar. And so and as I mentioned earlier, we rely very heavily on our vendor relationships to gather that information and push that out to our industry in any way that we can that's going to help propel the industry forward. We do that through our social channels as well. I think collectively we probably have about 100,000 followers between our LinkedIn and Facebook, etc. So yeah, I'm sorry for going so quickly, but that's sort of a very high level, I think, look at what's available, what our vendors that are looking to bring products and services into the U.S. If they're looking to drive awareness, that's probably the things that they want to have on their short list. And I'm happy to take questions afterwards, Gianni. I apologize for having to go so quickly.
No, I have to apologize because we took a half hour late and delay, which is not an habit for us, but it was so interesting. Probably we push everything, too many interesting presentation in the same program, and that's probably my fault. But as a general comment from what you were saying, it is very for me informative. I learned that not only California but all US, of course, has big groups and a lot of concentration of production, but you had huge number of family wineries, as Brian is calling them. So it's very small, very tiny, even smaller what we have in Europe, and that's a huge number. And if I want to understand, they are more or less spread out all around the country. And that my thought was that I used to work with suppliers of product, and of course for product is much more important one big account than so many. But those and many of our in our network are startups which are producing software or little machine, little equipment. That's not something which is proportional in terms of potential sales with the size of the winery, but in proportion to the number of the winery. So it would be very interesting. And what you were saying, Domingo, in terms of how to get in touch with these people, and what you also were saying, George, that is, I think, an important tip for the people who want to approach, because maybe there is much more of what we think for certain type of solutions, probably. So listen, I think we have been really too much in delay, but what I came out from all this workshop is that you have much more to say to us. So my proposal to Gracie and to the EPAWI project would be to somehow organize other occasions like this in the future with maybe less panelists and leaving them more time to express all what they can say, and more discussion would be different. But this was more, as I said at the beginning, sort of experiment, because we didn't really know if this kind of solution or initiative can really bring good information. And I can say yes, they bring a lot of good information. We deserve much more time. Gracie, I leave you concluding.
Quick thing. I wanted to say thank you for listening. I mean, this is really cool. Even we couldn't get everybody in and say everything we wanted to. The fact that you guys are listening is awesome.
Thank you, Brian. That's very kind. Very interesting. So thank you to Brian. Thank you to all of the panelists and Gianni for the organization. On behalf of the EPAWI and WICA projects, we want to keep working together to encourage knowledge sharing and collaboration in innovation and research and promotions of innovation across the ocean between different countries, North America, Europe, South America, South Africa, well, all over the wine producing world. And so to continue keeping to have these conversations. So as Gianni mentioned, the next steps of WICA, of the Wine Innovation Collaboration Alliance, will be announced in the coming months. And until then, please keep in touch. You can follow our website and our social media accounts. And of course, we can connect you with the panelists as well, and their associations to see about working together, making new projects in a new market. Keep in touch. Thank you to all. Thank you for the attendees, and of course to the panelists for your time. Very, very, very interesting information, and we'll stay in touch to continue working together. Have a great day, everybody.